Okay, and away we go. We're looking at LGBTQ artists through time. We're first going to look at the High Renaissance, which is basically 1490 to 1523. And we're looking at the most famous artist in the world, Leonardo da Vinci. And this is actually a portrait done of him by one of his assistants in his studio. Apparently he was a beautiful man. Okay, and then Michelangelo is the next person we need to talk about. The head of the Virgin in three-quarter view facing right is a wonderful piece by him. And I'm wondering, I don't think it's part of the Sistine Chapel. Studies of the Libyan Sibyl absolutely is a preparation sort of collage for the Sistine Chapel. I had one of the students a very long time ago, about 20 years ago, did a copy of this, and I think I still have it in my room. Michelangelo wrote poetry. A lot of people don't know that, but it's true. Okay, then we have Caravaggio, who has a lot of paintings that are homoerotic, and this is just one of them, Ecce Homo, of Jesus. And then you have the story of Rosa Bonheur, who was a lesbian and had a relationship with a younger artist named Anna Klumpke. And this is plowing, and what she's known for are her paintings of animals. This is Aubrey Beardsley, who was very ornamental in his works, and he also took up the illustration of various different topics, including mythology, and it's a self-portrait on the left, and one of his works on the right. Okay. So now we're going to talk about John Singer Sargent. And when I was in school, when I was in college in the 80s, I think most people knew that John Singer Sargent was gay, but it wasn't really talked about that much in class. And then just a couple of years ago, an art historian came across Thomas McKellar, who was an African-American model for John Singer Sargent. And what's sad is that he was whitewashed when he used McKellar's body in some of his frescoes at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and at the Boston Library. He made him white. And there was a huge show just maybe 3 years ago all about this, and he kept this painting of McKellar until he died. On the right is a work by the very famous Grant Wood. It's in my alma mater's memorial. It's in my alma mater's art museum, the Sheldon Art Gallery, or Sheldon Art Museum. And you'll see that there's two men bathing together in the right-hand corner. I don't know how people didn't understand that he was gay until recently, but yeah, so those are some clues. Okay, on the left is a work by Tamara de Lapinka, and she's originally from Russia, but she lived all over, including other countries in Europe. And she is an Art Deco artist. Art Deco is interested in the new technologies that are arising in the early 20th century. And she was bisexual. So there are a number of works in which you see two women. Okay. And then on the left is Romaine Brooks. I've always been fascinated by her. She is an English artist, and this is at the Seaside Self-Portrait. Okay, let's look at some photographers. This is Hannah Hoke on the left with her cat, which is wonderful. And then on the right is Bernice Abbott. Hannah Hoke was a Dada artist, so everything was sort of turned upside down by Dada artists. They questioned the definition of art, and they really were into automatic art, done without thinking. Okay, and then on the right, Bernice Abbott is known mostly for her cityscape photographs more than anything else. Okay, if I was transgender or a ally to transgender people, I would definitely look at Claude Cahun. So on the right, well, let's first sort of give the quote, masculine, feminine. It depends on the situation. Neuter is the only gender that always suits me, is what she said. So it's self-portrait actually I screwed this up. The self-portrait's on the right, okay. And then she's also playing with gender with I'm in training, don't kiss me on the left. All right, so two American gay artists on the left, Martin Hartley. He went to Germany and fell in love with Karl von Freiberg, KVF. And when KVF died in World War I, he made a series of paintings, I think about 10, I've seen them all, that used the patches on his uniform to create a sense of someone. Instead of doing a full portrait of Karl von Freiberg, he's hiding his love for him because of homophobia, and that's what you see here. On the right is another artist. I saw the figure 5 in gold, and it's based off of a poem by William Carlos Williams, and it's by Charles Demuth. And Charles Demuth, when he did this, I think he pretty much knew William Carlos Williams was gay as well. Okay, this is great. This is Buford Delaney's portrait of James Baldwin, who was gay. He did a couple of different portraits of James Baldwin in Paris. And on the right is Buford Delaney's self-portrait. There's a really big story. So Buford Delaney's friends got together and had a party and raised enough money so that Buford Delaney could go over to Paris. And he was still so poor that he took his rain jacket and cut it and made it into surface for his paintings. And the MIA, the MIA, has one of those paintings. You can go around and see the pocket of the raincoat. Okay, this is a work by Jasper Johns. He and Robert Rauschenberg met early on in their careers, and they were a couple for a little while, but then never again. Jasper Johns is still alive. He is 94. And it's an abstract piece to the left called Untitled 2018. And then on the right is Rauschenberg's Untitled Mona Lisa. He appropriated a lot of images from the history of art and also the common culture for sure. Okay, this is a haunting work by George Tooker, The Waiting Room. And then another haunting work by Francis Bacon, who's English. Tooker is actually American, yeah. Okay, pop art. Here we go. All right, so this is my favorite Andy Warhol work. It's his dog, Maurice. And so, yeah, I really appreciate this one. And then David Hockney, who's still alive, paints here Christopher Isherwood and Don Bachardi, who were a gay couple. And you're always going to get a lot of color, a lot of crisp lines with David Hockney for sure. Gilbert and George have been a couple since the 60s, and their most famous work is the Singing Sculpture, where they paint themselves and then come on top of the table and sing as sculptures. And then on the right is a photographic portrait from 2007, and they're still going strong. They're actually been looking at the use of stained glass windows, which is pretty cool. All right. And then here's Robert Mapplethorpe, self-portrait. There was a big brouhaha in the 80s when some of his works were disturbing to conservative Republican Congress people, and they pulled the show at the Corcoran Gallery when it was still around in D.C., and tried to make sure that there was less federal funding for LGBTQ artists. And then down below is a very famous piece by Felix Gonzalez Torres. It's candy that weighs the same amount as his lover did when his lover had AIDS. And you can take a piece of the candy and the guards will replenish it the next day. Another tragic loss to our culture is, of course, Keith Haring. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see the show a couple summers ago. It was absolutely amazing. The pieces were incredibly large, and he was just a wonderful human being. He did murals for hospitals, and he traveled all over the world, and he is somebody that I think is easy to admire. And then this is David Wojciechowicz. Don't know too much about him. It's a self-portrait. This one is part of a very famous series by Julie Moretu. We skipped Julie Moretu for some reason. This is a very famous series of photographs of the LGBTQ community by Catherine Opie. And I would say if you're looking for somebody who understands LGBTQ, the world of LGBTQ, look up Catherine Opie. This series is just stunning. Okay, here we have Kehinde Wiley, and he is... he usually paints men. In fact, for many, many years, he exclusively painted men. And then, round about 2012, he decided to do a series on women. And his method is the following. He'll be on the streets of Harlem, or actually he goes all over the world, and he'll stop people and say he's an artist and that he would like to paint them. And if they agree, they come to the studio. He has a photographer take an image of them. And usually it's in street clothes, and usually it's a recreation of a famous painting. In this case, it's based off of a French painting from the 19th century. And the thing that's different about this portrait series of women is that he actually had a fashion house in France create the images. Create the dresses for the women as they were posing. He then goes to China. One of his first boyfriends was Chinese, and he has a whole group of assistants who paint the backgrounds with incredible floral designs. Yeah. And then you have Isaac Julian, who's more of a filmmaker. And this is from his multi-channeled piece called Lessons of the Hour 10-Screen Film, 2019. All right. Nicole Eisenman, I would say, is probably one of the most highly regarded artists out there, for sure. She oftentimes is not interested in a realistic modeling of the figures in her paintings. In fact, sometimes they're very the backwards part of the bodies, and she's been doing some interesting stuff lately with cranes, which I saw, and putting a crane on its side and so on and so forth. This is called Morning Studio. And then here is a work by Micheline Thomas, The Lesson of Love. And she does paintings, she does photographs, and she does also videos. But she's most famous probably for her photographs or paintings. I don't know which one. Her subject is always African American women, and there's a lot of times there's a lot of African prints that are used. And what else? Oh, her mom sometimes is the model. Her mom actually was a fashion model for a while. Okay. Now we're to Glenn Ligon on the left. And when the Obamas came into the White House, they requested from the Hirshhorn Modern Art Museum, that's a part of the Smithsonian system, to have some works by Glenn Ligon in the White House instead of all the dead white male paintings. And these are made out of coal dust, and he has various different sources that he uses, and he's using a sort of an older font that's really from the 19th century, and he also uses stencils, which is great. On the right is one of my favorite artists out there, Zanelle Muhuli, and she's originally from South Africa. And she does a lot of stuff with self-portraits. And she also has made it a point to document LGBTQ life on the continent of Africa. And she has this really cool series in which she's in a contest called Miss Lesbian. Check it out if you're interested in her. She is just a real big presence in photography, contemporary photography today. Okay, now we're going to look at two native or indigenous artists. This is Jeffrey Gibson, photography portrait. And then, some of you guys have seen his punching bag at MIA. He's really having some breakout opportunities. He was in the Venice Biennale last year. So he basically represented he was the artist who represented the United States, which is amazing. And he's also gone sort of big. He's made some ziggurats out in gardens, which I think is amazing. Yeah, he's something else. And then this is a work by Brian Youngin, who's actually from Canada. So he's a First Nations person. And he takes Air Jordans and turns them into objects that look like Northwest masks. I have a whole set of postcards of these, and they're pretty amazing. I always wonder about the cost, because Air Jordans, for a time, were not particularly inexpensive. It would be interesting to know how much money he spent in making his masks. And then, last but not least, is Robert Indiana, maybe one of the most famous images in all of art history, LO over the VE. I imagine a homophobic person licking a stamp and putting it on their letter and not realizing that it's a gay man who created this graphic design. And then back to Marston Hartley, Robert Indiana took Portrait of a German Officer and also other images by gay artists in the 20th century, and sort of had the artist come out as gay through his own work, Robert Indiana's work. And so instead of hiding KVF, he's actually putting out the actual name. And Indiana did this as a series a lot. So, yeah, really good stuff. Okay, we're done with that. That was a nice little overview.